Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this section of the course. This is by far the most interesting section of the course because what we're going to do is we're going to build a fault-tolerant WordPress site using everything we've learned from all the previous sections of the course. And in this lab, we're going to get set up using the AWS console. Now, before we do that, I just want to show you what the end result is going to look like. And I've actually made this network diagram using a company called Draw.io. And if you go to Draw.io website, you'll be able to create AWS diagrams, and then you can export them as either XML files or as .png or .jpegs, etc. So if you ever do go work as a solutions architect in the real world, you can use Draw.io to build your network diagrams, and the best thing is that it's free. So this is our network diagram for what we're going to build. So we've got our users at the top. They're going to connect in over the internet to Route 53 and to CloudFront. It's going to hit our Elastic Load Balancer. We're going to have two security groups. One's a WebDMZ security group, and the other one is a security group for RDS. And basically, we've got two EC2 instances. They're going to be behind an auto-scaling group, and then we're going to have multi-AZ enabled on our RDS instances. And our EC2 instances will actually keep a lot of their files up in S3. So we're going to keep our WordPress code up in S3, and we're actually going to keep our media assets up in S3, which is then pushed out to CloudFront. And essentially what happens is if we lose an EC2 instance or if we lose an RDS instance, this setup is automatically going to heal and our users will not have any downtime. Now, I have kept this quite simple in a single region. You could actually have cross-region replication from your buckets. You can go crazy and have an active site in two separate regions with Route 53 doing health checks and failovers. But for the purpose of this course, I just wanted to keep it quite simple, and we're going to go through and build this now. Okay, so I've logged into the AWS console, and the first thing I'm going to do is just go over to Identity Access Management and create a new role. Now, you probably already have a new role for S3. I've just gone through and deleted all mine, so you don't necessarily have to do this if you've already got it. But I'm going to call it S3 role. Go ahead and hit next. It's going to be for Amazon EC2, and then it's just going to be Amazon S3 full access. And I'm going to assign this role to my EC2 instances when I create them. So there we go. I've created the role. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my VPC and set up two security groups. The first security group is going to be my WebDMZ, and the second security group is going to be my RDS security group. And again, if you've already got these set up from the previous labs, you don't have to do this. But I'm just going to go ahead and do this now. So we're going to call it WebDMZ and change that as the description. Hit yes, create. Okay, so my WebDMZ has been created. Now I'm going to go ahead and create my RDS security group. So we're going to call it RDS security group, and hit yes, create. Okay, so that's now being created. What I'm going to do now is just go into my Web DMZ security group and just go and allow port 80 in and also port 22. So there's port 22, add another rule, going to do port 80 over here, and we're just going to do the source of o.o.o.o/o. So that's our CIDR address block. And again, o.o.o.o/o, and hit save. And then with the RDS security group, I'm going to go in and just edit the rule. And I'm going to allow MySQL traffic. So we want port 3306. And the source, if you just click in here, you should be able to see your WebDMZ and just allow MySQL traffic through just to that other security group and hit save. So that is our security groups done. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go over here and go over to S3. Okay, so I'm in S3. Here's a test bucket that I created earlier. I'm going to go in and create a new bucket. I'm going to call this WordPress code 16 a Cloud Guru. And I'm going to go in and choose the region. So you want to choose the region that you just created those security groups in. So if you don't remember, just hit back and go check what region you're in. This lab will still work if you do another region, but I'm just going to stay in the US standard for now. So I was in North Virginia. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So this bucket is going to be where we're going to store all our code. And then I'm going to create a new bucket as well, where we're going to offload our media assets to. So we're going to call this WordPress Media 16 a Cloud Guru. Go ahead and hit create. And so that has now created it in US standard as well. So I've got my two buckets. Now that I have my bucket, I'm actually going to go in and configure a CDN for this bucket, because CDNs can take a little bit of time to deploy. So it's for WordPress Media 16. So we're going to go back over here. We're going to go down to CloudFront, and we're going to go create a new distribution. So I'm going to use a web distribution, and the origin domain name is just my bucket. So it's the WordPress Media 16. Origin path would be your subdirectory within that bucket, but I'm going to leave that blank because we don't have anything in there right now. So restrict bucket access. If you click here, it just says if you want to require that users always access your Amazon S3 content using CloudFront URLs and not S3, click yes. I definitely want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and create a new identity. We're just going to use the standard one here. And with the grant read permissions on bucket, I'm going to say yes, update bucket policy. And that basically just means that every time I put something into that bucket, it will always have read permissions for the rest of the public. Go down and leave everything else the way it is, and go ahead and hit create distribution. So that's now creating my distribution. It's a little bit silly the way they come back to this screen. So if you want to actually see what's going on, you have to click back on distributions to see it being created. But there we go. It's in progress right now, and that is going to be the CloudFront distribution domain name here. So you're going to need to make a note of that later on. So the next thing we're going to do is go in and create our RDS instance. So I'm going to go down to RDS. And I'll get this splash screen, but if you, if you don't, you can go in and hit launch instance. And we're going to use MySQL and go ahead and hit select. And I'm not going to use Aurora, I'm just going to use normal MySQL, and we'll go ahead and hit next. Now you can, this is entirely up to you guys whether or not you want to use free tier or not. I'm going to go ahead and use a T2 micro. And you can see over here, it says your current selection is eligible for the free tier. Now, if you're doing a multi-AZ deployment, then it's not going to be free tier ineligible. So it says here, disqualifies it. I'm going to do it just for the purposes of this lab. It's entirely up to you as to whether or not you want to do it. If you only leave these assets running for, a couple of hours while we play with it all, it's not going to cost you much at all. I'm going to leave everything else as the default, and I'm just going to call this A Cloud Guru to keep it really, really simple. Really bad security, but I just like to do this to keep it simple. So I'm going to use it as my DB instance identifier. I'm going to use it as my username, my password. I'm going to confirm my password. Go ahead and hit next. And then we're going to put this into our RDS security group, and I'm going to change the database name. It's going to be called A Cloud Guru. I'm going to make sure this is not publicly accessible. So there's definitely not going to be publicly accessible. And I'm going to leave everything else as is and go ahead and hit launch. So this will now launch a multi-AZ RDS instance that's not publicly accessible, which is going to be in my RDS security group. And the only thing that will be able to talk to this RDS instance is going to be our web servers, our EC2 instances that will be provisioned in our WebDMZ. So that's going ahead and provisioning now. There's two last things I want to do. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go down to EC2. We're not actually going to provision an EC2 instance yet. What we are going to do is provision a load balancer. And I'm just going to create a load balancer. I'm going to call it my WordPress LB. And I'm going to create it inside my default VPC. I'm going to leave everything else as is and assign my security groups. I'm going to put this into the WebDMZ security group and hit next. I'm going to hit next and configure my health checks. So we're just going to call this healthy.html, so healthy. And I'm just going to lower the health check interval to about 10 seconds, just so that essentially I'm going to lower the health check interval to 10 seconds and then the healthy threshold to 3. So basically this load balancer will now, any EC2 instance behind it will come into service within 30 seconds. So it just means our EC2 instances come up online much, much quicker. And I'm going to go ahead and hit next. We don't have any EC2 instances right now, so we'll just leave it. And I'm just going to call this name. I'm going to call it my WordPress ELB as a tag. Hit review and create. Go ahead and create this load balancer. So load balancer is now being created. And the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go across to Route 53. This is completely optional. It's whether or not you've already set up a hosted zone. So I have aforce.guru. Right now, there's nothing in it really. It's just got the statement of authority and the NS records. So I'm going to create a record set. I want this record set to basically be my naked domain name or my zone apex record. So I'm going to need an alias record for this. And then the target is going to be my Elastic Load Balancer, which I created. So my WordPress ELB or LB. And you can see here it's in US East 1. And I'm going to leave everything else as standard and hit create. Okay, so let's just review what we've done. We created an IAM role to access S3. We then went on to create our security groups. We created 2 buckets in S3. We then went on to create a CloudFront CDN. We've created our RDS instance using multiple availability zones. And then we put that RDS instance in our RDS security group. We then created our Elastic Load Balancer and put that in the Web DMZ security group. And now we've gone into Route 53 and we've created our Zone Apex record, which is an alias record. And we've pointed that at our Elastic Load Balancer. So we're all set up to go now to create our EC2 instance and configure it to work for this environment. So if you've got the time, join me in the next lab and we'll do exactly that.